It's time for the UNX News. Extraterrestrials, time anomalies, dimensions, remote viewing, UFOs, UAPs, and USOs, ghostly encounters, abductions, Bigfoot, and more. Your end of the week news source for everything unexplained. Here is your host for the UNX News Podcast, Margie K.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Margie K, and this is UNX News. We're here with another good show for you this evening. I do want to remind everybody to please go to unxnetwork.com and sign up, get a free or a paid membership, and you'll get a lot of extra perks as a member, including a daily newsletter, which will outline all of our shows for that day, for that evening. So you don't want to miss that. Go ahead and get signed up at unxnetwork.com. My guest this evening is Terry Tibando. Terry has had nearly 69 years of UFO sightings and ETI encounters and is one of the experts in Canada in understanding this phenomenon, having childhood encounters when ETI entered his bedroom on an RCAF military base in St. Jean's, Quebec in 1953. Terry is also known as the coordinator of CSETI Vancouver, and he has led teams of people for 29 years on field expeditions to establish successful contact and communications with extraterrestrial intelligences. Welcome to the show, Terry.
Thank you. Glad to be here with you, Margie.
Well, I'm so glad to get you back. We did a short interview before Contact in the Desert, and I wanted to have you back because you have a lot of experience and a lot to share, and I know people would love to hear about it. So if anybody doesn't know about you, they will by the end of this evening.
Well, that's the whole intention, I think, being on your podcast and many others as well. I'm trying to get myself known throughout Canada and the United States in particular, because I think the United States has a lot more going on with this phenomenon than Canada does. We get our sightings from across the country, and we get people who have encounters like myself with ETs. And so this is a chance to let people know who I am and also promote my books. I'm also trying to let people know that there is a MUFON symposium going on will be going on in Dallas, Texas on July 12th to the 14th. Mm-hmm. And I will be one of the presenters there.
Well, I'm really looking forward to that. I will be there with a booth, an UNX booth. And so I will make sure to look you up and also watch your talk. What's the name of your talk?
I'm giving a talk called A Citizen's Disclosure on UFOs and ETI, which is based on my books. And so it's an overview of my 6 textbook series on that title. And the interesting thing is I'm going to focus in on the German UFO program during the war, World War II, and how it was through Operation Paperclip transferred over into America, along with many other allied countries like Canada, Britain, France. So I'm going to be talking about those UFO programs or flying saucer programs that Germany developed. And, you know, this is probably at the crux of the UFO phenomenon that is currently going on in the States, because people feel that what we're seeing is unidentified. We don't know where it's coming from, whether it's from another country or whether it's extraterrestrial. And it's actually a little bit of both. But it's more aimed at what America is doing with this technology that through crash retrievals and shoot down programs, etc.
That sounds fascinating. Can't wait to listen to that. Things started for you really. I know your father saw a UFO when he was working at an underground facility at the NORAD SAGE site in Ontario. Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's actually just before he got involved in the underground safe site program with the Royal Canadian Air Force. Now, the thing to understand, and I will be talking about this a little bit and in my presentation, and that is my father. When he was a part of the Allied forces that went over to Britain and then into Holland and Germany. And one of the things is that when he came back, we all moved out to Victoria, BC. And then he decided to enlist with the Royal Canadian Air Force because he was in the Army at that time. So he enlisted into the Air Force because that was the thing that he knew about as a military serviceman. And he went back to visit his folks in Toronto. And that was around 1951, I believe. And when he got off the aircraft, which I think was a military aircraft at that time, as he was coming down the steps, he saw a hangar. Now, this hangar was in Moulton Air Force Base. And the unique thing about this is that now this is now known as Pearson International Air Force Base in Toronto. But it was a smaller base at that time. And as he came off the steps, he saw a hangar and the doors were open and he saw a disc-shaped craft in the hangar come out, glide out, and then sit there and hover for a few seconds and then shoot up into the sky about 1,000 feet or so. Now, the interesting thing is it hovered there momentarily, came back down, and went back into the hangar. And he swore up to his last breath that he saw a flying saucer back in 1951. Now, this got me looking and investigating this, because what exactly did he see? Was it a man-made craft or was it an extraterrestrial craft? Mm-hmm. And either one of these possibilities conjures up the questions of, well, where did the Canadians get hold of this type of craft? And the only thing that really may be more plausible using Occam's razor is that this may have been a German disc. And I came across a piece of folded paper within a gun shell that he had where he used to keep his cigarettes and tobacco. And I pulled this out as a young lad of about 8 or 10, and I looked at it and I said, "What is this?" And he said, "Oh, you don't need to know that. Put that back and, and put it in the where you found it, right?"
Okay.
10 years later, he said it was a flying saucer that I saw, and it was a little drawing of a elliptical, simplified drawing of this disc. Now, I took that description and I remember what it looked like, and I looked at a lot of the German saucers that they had been building, and I was trying to sort of match up to what he saw. And the only thing that comes close was a Vril 1 disc-shaped craft, which was known as a Yaga or Hunter. And it was a one-man craft that has an elliptical shape with a slate dome on the top for the pilot. Mm-hmm. Now, I can't say for absolute certainty that that's what he saw, but based on the description and understanding what that craft could do, according to George Klein, who is a Green Beret, he said that the Germans had craft that could hover and could go up and fly around. So based on that description, I thought that the best possibility or probability of what that craft was a Vril 1 Yaga or hunter disc-shaped craft. That means that somehow we acquired that craft into the country. Now, this brings up a lot of other related things to that sighting, because in 1953, we had moved, in 52, we had moved to North Bay, Ontario. And from North Bay, Ontario, we went to St. Jean's, Quebec in 1953. While I was there, my brother and I had the opportunity to climb all over and into a Messerschmitt 163 Comet rocket plane, which was a plane that there was nothing else like it. In fact, I believe the B-1 and the X-1 and the X-2 rocket planes developed by the U.S. were not built at that time. So we were literally playing with a highly advanced German piece of technology, and we had the opportunity to open the cockpit of this craft and take turns sitting in the pilot seat playing with the joystick.
Oh, wow.
So, 5 years old, and we're mucking around with a piece of technology, and nobody knew that we had done this. Absolutely nobody. And I had to think, okay, how did they get that aircraft into this military base? The St. Lawrence Seaway, which is a major seaway into North America, has various rivers and tributaries off of it. One of them runs right past St. Jean's Air Force Base, which I believe they must have brought this in, got it onto a barge or something, brought it up the river, and unloaded it right there at the base. Now,
that's sneaky. No one would see that.
No one would see that, right? Except 2 5-year-olds.
Right.
And so the thing is, the story that led up to that was my father and our family had just moved there, and he was playing baseball with some of the servicemen, and he asked if we want to come and watch. And I believe this was on a Saturday. And so we go and we watch, and we're the only 2 kids and 2 people watching this baseball game.
Yeah.
And we get bored pretty quick because we're not doing anything. So we're looking around, and we see this odd-looking craft on the tarmac. So my brother and I go running off, and we disappear for a half an hour. My dad doesn't miss us. And this is a German craft, which has swept wings, a large tail, and a tiny little propeller on the front end. And we were running our hands all over it, and then we found that the cockpit was open, and we flipped the glass cockpit dome and got inside it, played with it. So that means that if they had that technology back in 1953, could they have had a German disc located somewhere else? And this is what I think is a probability. But again, only my father knows, and he didn't mention that he saw any insignia on the craft. So I'm thinking it's probably German. But the interesting thing about all of this is that after I had seen this Messerschmitt 163E Comet rocket plane, within about a few weeks of that, my mother and I saw a UFO or flying saucer come over the base during the daytime. And I asked to my mother, "What's that?" And we were looking at this, and it's kind of wobbling, and it had just flown over one of the military buildings. And she looked at it, and she didn't know what it was. And she said, "I think it's an airplane." We don't know, right? And upon saying that, it took off. Within a day or two of that sighting, that's when I had ETs come into my bedroom.
Okay, that's really what I'm interested in hearing. Tell us the story about that.
Well, this was during the evening. my brothers and I were tucked into bed, and I guess my parents were retiring somewhat early. And I really don't know the time period, but I know it was in the night. And for some reason, I woke up and I was looking at the door of my bedroom, and I shared this bedroom with my twin brother and my younger brother, who was in a baby crib, and he's about a year old. So my brother and I are both 5 years old, and I see these beings, which I wasn't certain what they were. They looked like Casper the Ghost, because they were very bright and luminous, and they were coming through the wall. So I thought they were ghosts, and then something said like they're like little men, and they seem to have larger eyes than humans. They weren't black covered like the people who refer to this as the Zeta Reticuli beings, or the Greys. And it freaked me out because I didn't know what was going on. So I called out to my mother in somewhat of a panic, and she came in and said, "What's going on?" And I said, "There's little men behind the door." And she goes over and looks. She doesn't see anything. And of course, at the moment she goes over, they're not there. And she says, "I think you're having a bad dream," And she calms me down and reassures me, and there's nothing there. So she leaves the room. Within a minute or less, they're back again. And I'm thinking, what the hell is, going on?
Yeah.
And I'm in full panic mode, because she said I'm dreaming, and yet I'm still seeing these things, and I'm awake. And my brother beside me in the other bed doesn't see anything. And I probably have woken up the whole house. So now she comes back in, and I think she was upset and annoyed by the fact that I was screaming and hollering and all the rest of it. And I said, they're back. Take another look. And she looks at there, and I said, no, go over and take a look, in case they were hiding behind the door. And she looks, and there's nothing there. And she says, you're having a nightmare. There's absolutely nothing there. So she spends about 10 minutes calming me down, and she says, look, Christmas is not too far away. Think about Christmas and all the presents you're going to get. And that's a reassuring thing. It's a positive memory, right? And she leaves the room and says, "I'm now no more carrying on, no more crying. Get some sleep." Goes out the door, and I look at the wall again. There's nothing there. And I thought to myself, I must be dreaming. All of a sudden, there they are, a third time. This time they're coming through the wall, and they're walking around the bottom of the bed. And I see this, and I pull the covers over my head, thinking, well, if I don't see them, they can't see me. They're not there. That's the logic of a 5-year-old,
Sure.
Right? And at some point, I must have fallen asleep. But in the falling asleep state, something in the back of my memory said the covers came off me. Now, I have no memory after that point, other than these little beings coming around. And the next morning, I wake up, and I'm teased by my brother, because he says, I didn't see anything. You were just dreaming. And my mother thought the same thing. And I thought, well, in my mind, these were real. Now, the funny thing about it is I started drawing pictures of stars and planets and rockets. Very crude, but that's what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So that's usually an indication, in my understanding, that if you have a traumatic situation, you want to express it in some form. And drawing was one of the ways that I expressed that.
Mm-hmm.
And I since have always had a fascination with the stars and with planets and all the rest of it, which I think later on in life, when I went to university, I majored in astronomy and physics and all the various sciences, math, etc. So I think what I was looking for was answers to my 5-year-old event.
Yeah, it sounds like they probably took you on a trip, and you saw some things out there, and then that piqued your interest. Just,
But I have no memory of that. That's
right. Right.
But,
Have you been regressed or hypnotized?
No, and I kind of shy away from it. The only reason is because I've read so much and networked with people and saw shows and movies and documentaries and all of that reading, that I think I would confabulate a lot of stuff, and this is part of the problem. But I guess a good professional hypnosis hypnotist would probably pull that out, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But I remember a lot of this.
Is that the only incident that you remember that involved non-human beings?
When I have had sightings near my home, off in the distance. I've seen, different things, like either during the daytime or in the evening or at nighttime, where things are flying around and they don't look like airplanes, and they're not meteorites or comets or those kinds of things. I used to own a telescope, and I used to go out at night and look at Jupiter and its moons, the moon orbiting our Earth. I've seen Saturn. I've actually even seen, I think it was Uranus or Neptune, and it was like a green bluish dot of light in the sky, and it was the only thing I could see because in my telescope it looked like a planet, but I wasn't absolutely certain, and it didn't fly off or move anywhere. It was always in the telescope mirror, which I had a reflective telescope. So, but the thing is that I've seen different things. I actually built a UFO detector. Very simple. It was some wires, a magnet, a little alarm bell, and a 6-volt battery. And I put it in a big pickle jar. That was how it was cased. And it had this little wire and a magnet on the end with a loop. And what it would do is it would move around, and it would move around during the daytime, and in the evening. And my mother said, "Your UFO detector is going off again,"
Oh my goodness!
So
now, did you know what you were doing? Was that really a UFO detector?
Well, it was based on a description in a UFO magazine. I think it was called UFO magazine. It was I think it was put out by True publishers or something. It was something that you could easily get down in the States, and definitely, we got it up in Canada. And it had a description of how to make this, and I it's very easy to make. But I since have purchased a more sophisticated device that's very compact.
The Madar.
Pardon me?
Madar unit.
I forget. I think it was made in South America and brought up into the States, and then I got it, and it works like a charm. I've taken this device out with me when I go out and do CSETI work for the Vancouver group, and I've taken out hundreds of people at different times in teams, and various people in the group will experience things. So it's not just me that has this experience. We'll even see flashes of light or things moving over, zigzagging, and at times we'll have an experience where the ETs will land. We won't necessarily see them with our visual eyes, but the high strangeness that occurs is usually a compression of sound, a feeling of other presence within the group, fragrances that are not associated with the environment. And I always ask, is any lady wearing perfume or any guys wearing cologne? And they all say, no, I'm not using any of that. So then what are we smelling? We'll have changes in ambient temperature, and this is the interesting thing, is the ETs would come up and touch us. We can't see them.
Yeah.
I'm looking around to see who's touching me, and nobody's touching me. They're all sitting in a circle in their camp chairs. And what it feels like is like little insects dancing on your skin or little raindrops. And
I've had that feeling.
Yeah, and I've asked people without leading them in the conversation, did anybody experience anything? And one lady said, I felt like I had insects, and when I kind of brushed it away, there was nothing there. And I felt it on my face. So several of us had the same experience.
Mm-hmm.
And then when I was down in Rio Rico with Dr. Greer and about 200 other people, this is one of the largest events we had done up to the time where he did an event with at a UFO conference in Arizona where he had 800 people. But this was the largest one we had up to that time. And there was people literally from all over the world in this attending this seminar conference. And when we were out, I had an ET come up and poke me in the forehead, and I looked around, and the next person's 10 feet away.
Wow!
There's no way they could poke me in the forehead and sit down without me spotting that.
Yeah.
Right? I had my magnetometer with me, and it was going off incessantly for at least an hour and a half. And Dr. Greer said, is there any way to mute that? And I said, yeah. And I had I flipped the switch, so it was still activated, but it was just the light was pulsating or flickering, and indicating they were still transmitting whatever signal. And this went on for about 3 hours, where my magnetometer was receiving this electromagnetic interference or radiation or whatever.
My God.
And one of the interesting things is that up in Vancouver, there's an area very close to where I live, and it's actually in Coquitlam, just outside of Vancouver, and it's a park. And I brought this magnetometer, and we were setting up, and everybody's getting organized, and we're sitting down, and I was briefly explaining what we were going to be doing and what we can expect. And the magnetometer would go off, and it would go beep, beep, beep 3 times in a sequence. And every time I said something, it'd go beep, beep, beep again in sequence. And I realized that they were confirming what I was saying.
Yeah.
In the group.
Yeah.
And
I've had that happen.
And my magnetometer is not set up to do
that.
So
exactly.
It's totally different. And I've had it go beep, and it would go, and there'd be nothing for a minute or two. Beep. And I'm thinking, is this thing, the battery's dying, or are they communicating? So I think what it is that certain ET groups have a different way of communicating through this device, as well as through their presence. And usually when you start to have all this high strangeness, it means that the craft has landed, and in all likelihood, you're inside the craft. You just don't know it. Because all these other things are happening around you. Sometimes you see flashes of light moving around. I've actually had a strobe light that I had set up, like this park has 2 very large 50-foot or more diameter circles. And it's actually used by remote control model airplane enthusiasts. And there's a little landing strip as well. And so they bring out their airplanes and they fly them around. And so if they're out there when we show up, we wait for them to finish and pack up, and then we set up. And I had lights around one of these circles, strobe lights, and I had about 6 of them. And I had a TV crew out with me who were doing an interview, and they wanted to get some information and what we were doing, how we were doing it, and all the rest of it. And
Terry, we're up on a break. Hold
Yep.
that thought, and let's hear the rest of it right after the break. We'll be back right after this.
All right.
This September 6th through the 13th, join with like-minded souls in the experience of a lifetime on the Royal Caribbean Ovation of the Seas as we travel from Seattle to Alaska. Internationally renowned researchers, investigators, experiencers, authors, holistic healers, contactees, spiritual luminaries will sail on an extraordinary voyage of transformation. This cruise will explore UFOs, alien contact, cover-ups, ancient mysteries, the paranormal, holistic healing, and spirituality. Experience engaging lectures, one-on-one sessions, private, custom-tailored excursions, and a nightly UFO watch. The cruise is booking up fast. Go to contactatsea.com and be sure to mention the UNX Network when you book. That's contactatsea.com or phone 336-749-1219. That's 336-749-1219.
Hey, UFO conference enthusiasts. We've got another great event for you in 2024. The Saucers and Aliens Kansas UFO Day in Dimension G is being held in the UFO capital of Kansas, Geneseo, on July 6th. This is a fun festival in the middle of nowhere. There will be a parade, decorated yards, costumes, vendors, speakers, and a showing of the movie The Day the Earth Stood Still. Appropriately, an 8-foot-tall statue of Gort and a statue of Plateau will be dedicated. This will be the only museum in the U.S. with these custom-made statues. If you'd like to donate to the statue project or attend the event, visit GeneseoMuseum.com. That's GENESEO Museum.com. Be sure to bring your camera when you attend the event. That's GeneseoMuseum.com. We're back with the next news. I'm your host, Margie Kay, and my guest this evening is Terry Tibando. Terry, would you finish your story about when you were setting up with the news crew?
Right. So our group usually tries to go out about once a month, usually from spring to fall. In the winter, it's the weather changes dramatically and what have you.
Right.
Now, when we were out with the news crew, this was BCTV, which is now, I think, Global TV. And they were interviewing me and my CSETI team. And we had the lights set up, strobe lights, to indicate where our location was and as a possible landing area for any craft that would show up. And these circles that we had set up our lights around were approximately 50 to 75 feet in diameter. So they're fairly large. And at the end of the session of being interviewed, and everybody's packing up, I go over to pick up my lights, and I notice one is missing. And I'm thinking, oh, what happened here? Did the light fall over? Did it no longer function? And I was using my flashlight to look for it, but I could not locate it. And I thought to myself, well, the best thing for me to do is to come back early in the morning and look for it, and I'll probably find it because it will be there. Now, as we're moving across the field, one of the news crew says, what is that light over in the off to one side of the field? And a friend of mine and I looked at it, and it seemed to be flashing. And I went over, and there's my light. And I thought, well, how does it move approximately 200 feet towards this location, which was about a foot away from a little gorge or a stream? And had it gone another foot further, I would not have seen it. It would have fallen into the stream. But there it was, and I picked it up, and my first impression was to be factual about what happened. Could an animal have picked it up, ran off with it across the field to this location, thinking it was food, and then realizing it wasn't and dropped it? And so I picked it up, and I thought, I couldn't feel any saliva. I smelled it to see if there was any animal smell on it. It was bone dry. And I thought, how does it move over there? You know, we should have seen it bobbing along if an animal had picked it up and ran off with it.
That was my first thought.
That's so I had to be rational about my thinking, because I don't want to jump to conclusions and say something else had occurred. I mean, even one of the other people could have picked it up and moved it over there, but we were all sort of packing up our stuff and moving it towards our cars. So how did it get over there? And I remembered that I had sort of asked the ETs, if they really are around, could they do something that was undeniable? Something, and I believe that that's what it was. They literally moved that light over to that location, knowing that it was still flashing, that we would see it. And I've had other situations like that, but what that indicates is their ability to not only be able to touch us physically, but we could not do the same to them. In fact, we wouldn't know where they were, because they're not visible to our naked eye. And yet, if they could touch us, they could also move something. Mm-hmm. I've heard reports like this from other people from other locations down in the States and all the rest of it. So this was something that was very profound, very definite. And when I questioned everybody, was somebody playing a joke or prank? Nobody. And it was the fact that one of the members of the TV crew pointed it out to us, that we, went over and investigated. Now, when ETs show up and we get these things where we're smelling things or we're being touched, in all likelihood, the craft is right there on top of us. We're inside of it, which then begs the question, how is that possible? What science is being used? And I've seen a number of situations in different locations that would indicate that we're dealing with interdimensionality or interdimensional technology. And people say, well, how do you even justify that statement? How can you prove it? I know that the fact that as a youngster, having ET beings come through the wall, physical structure, indicates that they have a science that we, at that point, probably didn't know about or understood. We also know, and I've seen this, where a craft comes in and it's like a red sphere, and it's moving over the ground or above the ground, and all of a sudden it splits off into 6 other craft. all of the same size. And I'm thinking, how can you put something of that many of the same size within one craft? And in my understanding of science is that everything about us, the objects that we utilize throughout the day, the homes, the trees, etc., are really nothing more than atoms with space between it. If you can move the frequency of that particular object slightly out of phase, it can then merge with another object so that it can literally be within another object. And if you have 6 craft doing the same thing, each one out of phase with the other, and they're nested within that one craft, then that's a form of interdimensionality, transdimensionality, if you want to call it that. I've seen it in their spacecraft. I've seen it in their being and what they have done. We know that when people talk about underground bases in the sea, etc., they don't need that. They're within their own craft. That's enough of a environment for them to survive in or to move out of it at any time. So if they are moving into the ocean and people are saying, well, they have undersea bases, what is the proof of that? Where do you see those bases? And if you're seeing bases, are they ET or is it the possibility they're man-made? And we know that with the shoot-down programs that the U.S. has had, that they have started to understand some of this technology, not all of it, but they're understanding a lot, and they're already tinkering with a form of interdimensionality, which scares the bejesus out of me, because now we're not just dealing with physical things. We got to be concerned with the fact that something can be out of phase, invisible, can move through solid objects, and can get around at various rates of speed or in different configurations like a craft or even something that they're wearing and they're invisible to you. I'm not saying that we have got all of that mastered, but the technology is definitely there. And I know from Dr. Greer has stated this several times that he had the opportunity to go to one of these underground bases by the U.S. military. He got in, they got him a pass. How he got that pass, I do not know, because they're very strict, but he had a pass that allowed him to get into an underground facility. And these underground facilities are known as dumps, deep underground military bases. And they're all over across the states. They figure there's at least 200 of them underground throughout the states, plus what's in Canada, plus what's up in Great Britain, whatever is over in Australia, whoever is an allied partner with the Americans or the U.S. probably has some of these bases. Now, my father worked in an underground base, a SAGE site, which was hooked up to NORAD in Cheyenne Mountain. And he said he used to go there either on a daily basis or weekly basis and not come home for a week because he was underground. And they have these great big 2 or 3 foot heavy metal doors that, you know, they open up and you can't get in unless somebody allows you to get in. And when you get in there, it's set up very much like Cheyenne Mountain. There's a building inside of it. There's a tunnel system that runs all over the place. The building is built on giant springs so that it can absorb a blow from a weapon outside. And the one that I know about in North Bay was under a mountain beside a lake. And essentially you drive into the entrance, and then as you get in, there's the big metal door that you have to go through. And only certain people get in there. So my father had that right to get in there. And he said there were several floors. And I've seen the model of this building. They used to bring it out every year when they had an air show up in North Bay in the Air Force Base. And what was interesting about this base is that the Americans used to send up their aircraft that had finished dropping the A-bomb test down in the Southwest, and Canadian servicemen would scrub down the aircraft.
Oh, you're kidding.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, they sent it to Canada to have it cleaned of any radiation? Wow.
My dad wore a Russian badge that they would take off and run it through a scanner to find out how lethal a radiation they absorb. Of the 60 or 70 men that worked there, all of them came down with cancer. Some of them died.
Oh, no.
My father was the last one of that group. And he was able to get disability, and they put a lawsuit against the military on this. And so they were able to give the service families reparations. Now, the interesting thing that at this air show, they had this underground model of the complex, all made of plexiglass. So you could see what inside of what it looked like. And the interesting thing is one floor was devoted to computers. So there was at least 3 levels of this. And that computer today is probably can fit into your phone.
Mm-hmm.
If you can see that.
Yeah.
And so that's the sophistication that we've come by or have developed since that time. Now, my father obviously had worked in some sensitive areas, and I think he got privileged by seeing certain things that perhaps the rest of the military didn't see. I actually had the ability to communicate with the CEO of that underground base, who has since retired, and I was able to get some information out of him, not a lot, because I think he was still under certain legal binding oaths from the military. But what they did was they decommissioned that base. And I asked him why, and he said, well, because they used a lot of asbestos in it. And so part of that was that base going in and out of there could have been also lethal to you over a period of time. So I said, well, what did they do with the base? And they said they moved it to the surface. And I thought to myself, I'm a bright, reasonably intelligent person. Why would you put a sophisticated system on the surface? If there's a nuclear strike, that's the first place they're going to hit, you know, because it's hooked up with Cheyenne Mountain down in Colorado. So I didn't go into asking him why, because I think to me the answer was obvious, but they had their reasons for doing that. So now that underground base is now used for filming and making movies, but they do so at their own risk.
Oh, I'll say, my goodness.
So, yeah.
That's scary.
The thing is that getting back to the original question of have I seen other ETs? Yes, I have. I've seen them down in Crestone, Colorado. Some of them are very tall. The ones that I saw were probably close to 7 feet, if not taller, wearing dark, almost like hooded robes. And I could see them off in the corner of my eye. And as I turned, I couldn't see them. But when I looked in that direction, I saw something else in the opposite direction. And I was with Dr. Greer and about 32 people who were doing the CE5 event down there. And I went, I was out taking a bathroom break. And when I came back, I said, Dr. Greer, we've got ETs around the whole group here. And he said, yeah, I'm aware of it. We're seeing this. You'd look off.
So did they appear solid or were they transparent?
I wouldn't say solid because the fact that I could catch them off in the corner of my eye suggested that they may have been using some kind of stealth technology, possibly. And this is nighttime, so there wasn't a lot of light, but there was light coming from the group and from distant farms in the area, and you could see something moving past the lights.
Mhm.
And that was on one occasion. Another occasion, I was putting out strobe lights in the same area, and as I'm running around putting these lights out, I got the feeling that there were ETs in the field, but small ones. And they're saying, look out in case he steps on you.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know, in other words, I felt that if they're that small, and I'm a 6-foot person, how small were they, right? And
Mhm.
so there would be rustling and movement in the shrub and the sage and whatever else is in that area. Another time, I had I've had remote views of different ETs as well. It's like I got a download of different xenophile or xenotype ETs, and some of them are truly bizarre looking. We tend to think of ETs as humanoid. No, that's only some of them. We're living in an infinite universe, and that infinite universe has trillions upon trillions of stars. I mean, in our own galaxy, we've probably got billions of stars, and then you got trillions of planets, and that's just one galaxy, right? And
Right.
if you're looking back 13 to 15 billion light years away at all those galaxies, which now look like points of light in the sky, but they're actually galaxies full of billions and trillions of stars, etc., then there must be an incredible amount of life out there. And this begs the question of, is the universe just us, or is it filled with life? And I believe that life is the major element of a universe. Life survives, it thrives, and it's infinite. And there's a quote from the Baha'i Faith that's rather interesting because it got me thinking. And it's by Baha'u'llah, who's the prophet, founder of the Baha'i Faith. And he said, know thou that for every fixed star, and by fixed he means stable star, it hath its planets, and every planet its creatures, whose number no man can compute. What he's saying
Mhm.
is there is life everywhere. Don't think it's just on this planet. All of a sudden, this brings up a lot of other things. A lot of questions suddenly arise because you're trying to say, well, how is it that they are able to travel here? Do they have a prophet or a manifestation of God? How do they learn about the oneness of the universe? What is all this about? And some of those answers are there. Some of them we still don't know what they are. We have to search for it. So I have this thing where I debate this with some scientists and some people of that rational thinking, that science and religion are really one and the same animal, that it's really knowledge, and that the knowledge of science is through discovery and invention. And that's how knowledge is acquired. And they process it and go through theories and work at something to get an understanding. And if it doesn't work, they look for another theory until eventually the facts fall into place. When you look at religion, religion is knowledge through inspiration and revelation. And it's in a form that is not necessarily reproducible, but it can be tested. And so one of these tests is like that quote I gave you, is that science can explore that and prove one way or the other, is that a reasonable statement, and can we test it in the sense of finding life, or can we disprove it? So the onus is on science to prove or disprove. Religion can come out and give these prosaic statements, and usually it's based on what they call rationale and common sense, and something that is apparent to any rational person. But your belief in it determines your faith. And that's what faith is whether or not you want to believe it. And if you believe it and it can be confirmed, or it's something that gives you some point of centeredness, some sense of purpose in your life, or some direction, then that's what religion does. And really, religion is nothing more than spirituality. I'm not talking about the institution of religion, where we build churches and temples and synagogues and mosques, which is a place for us to congregate and worship as a collective. But you can worship at your own home, in your own bedroom, in your own house, whatever you want to do. That's between you and that great creator. And is it a person? No. In fact, the Bible says, and I've read a lot of comparative religions, and the Bible says that that which is spirit and that which is flesh. We're flesh and God is a spirit. Right? So if that's your religious belief, great. If it's not, great. It doesn't matter to me. Right?
Right.
I conduct myself.
Well, Terry, we are unfortunately out of time for this evening. Where can people get your volume 6 and all of your other volumes?
Well, you can go to Amazon. You can Google A Citizen's Disclosure on UFOs and ET. It's probably one of the first things that comes up. You'll see all 6 volumes. You can go to Barnes & Noble, Book World, Booktopia, Hudson Books. Those are down in the States, and many, many more. Up in Canada, you can go to Indigo and to Black's or Cole's books. You can also go online, because these books are available online. And so Amazon, depending which country you're in, it will be in the US, it's Amazon. In Canada, it's Amazon.ca. In UK, it's Amazon UK, etc. These books have sold internationally. They don't sell a lot because they're really like a textbook. They're very massive. And that's 6 volumes of 3,636 pages. And I wrote it as one book originally.
Oh my gosh.
It took me 8 years, and then I spent 2 years of editing and trying to get all the mistakes and spelling errors out of it. There's still a few. I'll keep finding 1 or 2 in there, but it's pretty good.
Well, that's just an amazing work.
And it's full of colored pictures, fully referenced. Everything I state is referenced. Even the photographs are referenced. There's a compendium or at the end of all the places where I got this information from. A massive index, a massive table of contents.
Wow.
It will keep you busy. And it's everything you could possibly ever wanted to know about this subject, and then some.
Well, I'll tell you what, I'm looking forward to reading all 6 books. I'm going to start with number 1. Thank you so much for being on the show tonight.
Number 1 is the primer.
Okay. All right. Indeed. Thank you for being on the program, and I'll see you at Contact at Sea.
That's right. I was just going to give that a plug and say that I will be a tentative speaker at that Contact at Sea. And
awesome.
Essentially, I'm looking forward to networking with everybody. So and you as well. So yes, hopefully everybody who's interested in a fantastic sea cruise will be there.
All right. Thank you so much, Terry. This is Margie K with NX News, and that is a wrap for another show. See you here next week.